Oh no, on my YouTube. I don't know.
Okay, we learned last week.
It's not you. It's
We
not
learned,
you.
I didn't want to be on the.
we learned last week that the Talmud presents a disagreement between two opinions of how to light the menorah. One opinion is Beis Shammai's opinion, and the school of Shammai feel that you light 8 on the first night and you light 1 on the 8th night. And that corresponds to the bulls which are offered on the holiday, the festival of Sukkot, that they go down in number, 13, 12, till you get to 7. Beit Hillel, their school of thought is that we light 1 on the first night and 8 on the 8th night. And they say, well, in holy matters, one never decreases, one never goes down. One always is supposed to increase unless you have a specific instruction to indeed decrease. So you can't learn from the Sukkot commandment to decrease to a Hanukkah, because that is the exception. The rule is you always go up, and therefore from 1 to 8. And we discussed last week that Beis Shammai's thought and their thought process in explaining and in deciding law was always to focus on the potential. And it's very consistent throughout the Talmud. There are dozens upon dozens of discussions between Beis Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai was always focused on what is coming, on the potential. And Beit Hillel was always on the practical. What is here now? It's much easier, much simpler to focus on the practical than on the potential. Many people can't see potential. There are certain people that if you show them a half a job, they'll say, how are you going to get to the next level here? How do you do this? And as much as you'll explain it, they just cannot visualize it. And this is in all professions. You have people, you show them, you discuss with someone the idea of an article. So I'm going to use this metaphor as my beginning, my opening, and then I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask, but wait a minute, how are you going to get from one to the other? And they can't see it until you put it on paper. And, oh, that was very good. Or you're somebody building something. And you look and you say, how are you going to get from there to the chuppah? You say, well, if you can imagine it, I can't imagine it, I can't visualize it, I can't see it. Well, in that case, you have to show the person the final product, the finished product, and for that person to see. And many people can't know how you got there, the process of getting there. So practical is much more. The practical focus is much simpler to explain and to accept. Beit Hillel focuses on the practical, and therefore it's easier to accept. That's why the law follows Beit Hillel. In the time of exile, the law follows Beit Hillel. It does say somewhere that after the Messianic era, we will be able to follow Shammai's ruling, which was usually more strict because they're focused more on the potential. But that we need to be on a higher level to do this. So it wasn't just a simple argument of logic, but it was more of an argument of how to look at things. And that's basically the argument throughout the Talmud. When you find arguments between two rabbis, it wasn't that one was right and one was wrong. They were both right on certain levels. This wasn't just a petty argument. I say this guy is good and that guy is good. That's not the way the arguments went. The arguments were always about debating, should the law be this way or should the law be that way, as a matter of the perspective of how you look at things. Which really, once one understands that, once one appreciates that, one looks at the Talmud in a whole different way. Because again, it's not like a debate between two people. It's more like today's setting, if you will, which again is no comparison, but just to give an example, would be like lawyers arguing a case. They spend months thinking and building up a case. Then they find different avenues and different areas each one of them knows that if they were given the opposite job, they would do that job the same way. It's not like they felt that this was a good cause. It's very rare that happens, that they feel it's a good, they thought it was a good salary. And so their whole minds are working on one direction, and they use their minds to find and to strengthen their argument. So that in such a way, O.J. Simpson gets free, although everybody knows who murdered those two people. And that's why Zimmerman goes free, because it was obvious the case was pretty simple to those who saw it, and so therefore, but the presentation was much more strong. They had a better presentation. There's no comparison because the rabbis weren't sitting around getting paid for their opinions, and it wasn't. And these were holy people who were talking from a spiritual standpoint, not just from the way they felt. And even more so, these were people who understood the Jewish people, understood the people they were talking to, who understood the Torah that they were talking about. So it's not. These are the best, the finest that we've ever had, the Talmudic sages. And so the debates in the Talmud are not just simply feelings, but they're debates that are based on the ideas of how the Torah can be best adapted and explained and understood. So Beis Shammai says we go down from top to down, from 8 to 1, and Beis Hillel says we go climb up from 1 to 8. Okay, that's where we stopped last week. Page 22. The anomaly pointed out by the Alter Rebbe. This is, I'm sorry, the second paragraph. The anomaly pointed out by the Alter Rebbe is well known. The Alter Rebbe, if you look at footnote number 6, it's all the way on the right-hand side, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, founder of the Chabad Hasidism. He was the first Rebbe of Chabad, author of the Tanya, that's the seminal book of Hasidic philosophy for all Hasidim, and Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is the code of Jewish law that he had written as well. He was born in 1745. Yesterday was his birthday, and he passed away in 1812, exactly 200 years ago. This past winter. So the Alter Rebbe, the Alter is Yiddish for old, the old Rebbe, the first Rebbe, the founding Rebbe. The song that we sang on that chuppah was composed by him and this Rebbe. That tune that was sung, yeah. So he asks the question. The Rebbe who wrote what we're saying now, what we're studying now, quotes from his predecessor, the first Rebbe. This Rebbe was the seventh Rebbe, is the seventh Rebbe, and that Rebbe was the first Rebbe. So he points out, what connection is there between the Hanukkah lamp and the bulls of Sukkot? You tell me that Beis Shammai looks into the bulls of Sukkot, and he uses that example to explain why on the first night he claims that you should light 8 lamps, and on the 8th night you should light 1 lamp, going down, because he learns it from the bulls of Sukkot that also go down. Why would you learn Hanukkah from Sukkot? What connection is there between these two festivals? They seem to be completely different types of festivals. And the Rebbe will ask this question. I just would like to remind you that last week we discussed this, and that the Rebbe had suffered a massive heart attack at the end of Sukkot in 1977. And 2 months later, the doctors, he had recovered enough for the doctors to allow him to go downstairs in the main shul of 770 Eastern Parkway with the elevator, and actually sit in front of the Hasidim and do what he loved to do, which was to teach Torah in that setting. So this is literally about 2 months after he suffered a massive heart attack on the festival of Sukkot, and he's connecting everything ultimately to that time It's as if he's saying there's no disconnect. I want to bring this time together. So it's all the emphasis is in that period of time was always the connection between these two festivals. But what would be the connection between Hanukkah and Sukkot? The question is especially compelling in view of the Tzemach Tzedek's statement. Now, who's the Tzemach Tzedek? That's a name of a book, or a series of books. Now, let's look at number 8, footnote number 8. Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, grandson of Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, that was the first Rebbe, and third Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was born in 1789 and passed in 1866. He is known as the Tzemach Tzedek after his scholarly work of halachic responsa by that name. He uses that name, Tzemach and Tzedek, and that actually equals, in the Hebrew, equaling his name, Menachem Mendel. But those two words, Tzemach Tzedek, equal Menachem Mendel.
What do those two words mean? I know that.
What
do the two words mean?
Tzemach means to sprout, like growth, and Tzedek means righteousness or justice. So Tzemach Tzedek is the righteous sprout, or the justified sprout. And he called him, his books, they were called that way. I don't even think by him. They were called, and somebody must have figured out that equals his name. So he's known as the Tzemach Tzedek now. We just call him that. Instead of calling him a name of Rebbe, like the old Rebbe, we just call him the Tzemach Tzedek. He's the only one of the 7 Chabad Rebbes that he's not called by a title, but rather by the name of his book. Which happens, by the way, a lot in Judaism. You call people by the book. I can tell you names, you might not be familiar with the Chasam Sofer, and you just say the title of the book, which is very interesting. Instead of calling them by some title of their name, it's just by the title of their book, which is unusual. That's how it is. So he's called the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the grandson, his mother was the daughter of the first Rebbe. And her name was Devorah Leah. Our daughter Leah is named after this Rebbe's mother, the daughter of the first Rebbe of Chabad. What she did was, she passed away on the same day as my wife's birthday. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, she had a prophetic vision that her father's life is about to end because of the difficulties of disseminating Chabad Hasidism. And from heaven, they made a decree that he was going to die. And she called 3 of the great prominent Hasidim who had come to visit Rosh Hashanah, called them into a room, and she said, I have to ask you to acquiesce to a request of mine without knowing what the request is before I tell you. In other words, I'm going to tell you something now, and I want you to agree before I tell you that you're going to follow my instructions. And they said we have to consult. They thought about it. They realized that if she's going to say something, this must be something profound. They agreed. And she said, I know that my father was decreed that he was going to die, and I want to go instead of him. And they were all so shocked. That's not the last thing they expected, but they had no choice. They had to acquiesce. So these 3 rabbis were like the Beth Din, the court, and they agreed. And that night, the first night of Rosh Hashanah, when her father came to wish her a good year, she said, I have a good year, before he knew what was going on. And she grabbed it before him, and she died 2 days later. A young woman in her 20s. Her son was 3. She had told her father on her deathbed, I asked for one thing, take my son as your own. So he grew up in his grandfather's house, and he had the best education that could be. And he eventually became the 3rd Rebbe. He married his first cousin, which is permissible according to Torah, who was the daughter of his predecessor. He was the son-in-law of the son of his uncle. His uncle, the firstborn son of the first Rebbe, became the 2nd Rebbe, and his daughter, her name was Chaya Mushka, was married to her first cousin, and they had, I think it was 9 children. And the youngest son became the 4th Rebbe. Anyway, so this Tzemach Tzedek, the grandson, he makes the following statement. I'm going to start again from the beginning of the paragraph. The question is especially compelling in view of the Tzemach Tzedek's statement that Beit Hillel's objection to Beit Shammai's view is based only on the principle of one must ascend in holy matters. So let's look at footnote number 10 and then we'll talk about it. Beit Hillel does not argue with the premise of Beit Shammai, which compares the Hanukkah lamp to the Sukkot bull offering. He doesn't argue that you can't compare the two. He doesn't say no comparison between Hanukkah and Sukkot, therefore end of story. All he says is we have a different principle. Rather, Beit Hillel introduces another principle, a principle that they feel overrides any comparison with the bulls of Sukkot, namely that one must ascend in holy matters. So Beit Hillel says, hey, what's the comparison between Hanukkah and Sukkot? What are you comparing the bulls of Sukkot to the lamp of Hanukkah? What are you comparing those two? He doesn't say that. He just says, sorry, I hear what you're saying, but we have a different rule. And the rule is you have to always ascend. In truth, then, Beit Hillel agrees with Beit Shammai that there is a valid equivalency between the Hanukkah lamp and the bulls of Sukkot. But what exactly is this equivalency? How will you compare it? And there's no discussion about that. Hillel seems to agree that you can compare them, except in this case I'm not using that logic because there is another principle that I have to follow, namely always rising, always elevating when it comes to something holy. So the Rebbe is asking this question, so then we need to figure out what would be the comparison between Hanukkah and the festival that precedes it, which is Sukkot. Now, many sources explain that Hanukkah and Sukkot are connected because they are both 8-day holidays. And I spoke about this last week. The Torah talks about Sukkot being 7 days. You must dwell in the Sukkah for 7 days. But then, at the end of all of this, the Torah says, and on the 8th day should be a day of stop for you, called Shmini 8 Atzeres, stop. That's the holiday. If you check your rabbi's message, you'll see at the last 2 is Shmini Atzeres and then Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah is the 9th day, really, essentially, of Sukkot. So it is a 7-day holiday. Then there is the 8th day. And then outside of Israel, we do it for 1 extra day, as we do all the holidays. We have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. We have 2 days of first days of Sukkot. We have 2 days on the last part of Sukkot, 8 and 9. We have 2 days of Passover at the beginning, 2 Seders. We have 2 days at the end of Passover. We go for 8 days, not 7 days. We have 2 days of Shavuos. So the biblical holidays are all more than one. It's always an extra one outside of Israel. So on the extra day of Sukkot, we call that Simchas Torah. That's when we complete the Torah. In Israel, they only have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. The rest of the holidays, biblical holidays, are all 7 or 1 day of Shavuot, 7 days of Passover, not 8 days. And the same thing with Simchas Torah. They have their Simchas Torah on the 8th day, which is, again, the 8th day of Sukkot. So we don't do the Lulav on that day, but outside of Israel, we stay in the Sukkah. In Israel, they don't even sit in the Sukkah on the 8th day, but it's still the 8th day. It's a continuation. So it's an 8-day holiday, although the 8th day is somewhat different than the other previous 7 days. Things change a little bit, but essentially it's the same continuation of a holiday. So here you got 8 days, biblically, of Sukkot. And how many days of Hanukkah? Well, 8 days. Do we need another comparison? That's good. That seems like a pretty fair comparison. 2 holidays in the year, both of them with 8 days. So some say that would be the connection. Now, the number 8, here's the next point here, signifying the level that is beyond Hishtalshalut. The word Hishtalshalut in Hebrew means the chain. A shalshelet is a chain. Hishtalshalut would mean the chain reaction. A chain which has a link from top to bottom. That concept of a chain, where something starts in one end and it ends in another end, is the metaphor that is used to describe the flow of energy, that which we talked about at length in the previous book, the flow of energy from God down to this world. And we always talk about the seven. So if you look at the diagram here, and if you take off the top three which are connected to intellect, count the other circles that Robert painted so beautifully. How many do you have on the bottom? 7. And as we discussed last time, these refer to the characteristics of a human being, and we are created in the image of God, meaning that the same way we process information from our intellect until we manage to implement what we have processed in our minds takes 7 steps, if you want to do it right. And of course it depends on the subject, but it can include 7, a total and a maximum of 7 steps. And similarly, the energy from God that flows starts off from an intellectual level, which would be more of a removed type of level, but then as the process begins, the flow begins to go, and it goes through 7 filters, if you will, until it ends the one level and goes to the next level, or until it reaches the bottom, which is the multicolored circle on the bottom over here. And just as a quick brief reminder, we have the 7 characteristics, which incidentally are compared to the 7 days of the week, which is why we have 7 days and not, it mathematically doesn't make any sense, the 7 days. It doesn't fit into any of the other calculations, which is the sun going around or the world going around, whichever way you want to look at it. The calculations of 7 don't fit into that. The reason why there's 7 days in a week is because God created the world in 7 days. And the way He created the world, each day represented a different characteristic. So the first one, the one on the right-hand side of here in the blue, is chesed, which means kindness. That's the beginning of everything. It's a flow. Kindness wants to give non-stop. It flows. First day, God created light. Light gives. The only way you're going to stop light is by putting something in the middle and stopping it. But that won't stop the giving. It will just stop the receiving of it. But the giving of light doesn't end, unless the source of light stops. But it's giving, kindness. The second level on the left, that red circle, is called discipline, severity, might, strength. It's a withholding level. It's a stop. Don't flow like this. Hold on a second. I need some filters over here. You can't give the kid ice cream all the time, as much as the kid wants and cries and carries on. That's not being kind. That has to be disciplined. Okay, the middle one is called Tiferes. Oh, on the second day of the week, God divided between the upper waters of the world and the lower waters of the world. Those are a separation between upper waters and lower waters, as the Torah says. And from then on, the lower waters are this world, and the upper waters are somewhere else, not here. They're more spiritual, metaphorically spiritual. So the second day is withholding, separating. The third one is in the middle. That's Tiferes, meaning beauty or harmony, a mixture of giving and withholding. That is compassion, Rachmanus. Rachmanus is a Hebrew or Yiddish word for compassion, mercy. And we have mercy on those who need mercy. So it's not a flow. It's a flow that's directed towards someone, but it's a giving. So it's a mixture between giving and therefore it's called beauty, because beauty is always, when you mix colors, it becomes beautiful. A plain color, not necessarily as much. That's why this room is so beautiful. It has a brown and it has a beige and then it has a white. I don't know if it's that beautiful, but look at a painting. A painting is filled with colors. I mean, look at this painting. It's got blue, it's got white, and it's got all multicolors, black and white, and blue and orange. That's what makes that thing beautiful, because you combine colors. And on the third day of the week, God created the beauty of the world, which is the green. Just ask anybody who was at that chuppah. All that green made that, isn't that beautiful? It's a dark green and light green, and then the color of the water and the sky and the mountain. All of that is color, which is vegetation, the flowers and so on. The fourth level on the right hand side, that's why it's in the middle, by the way, because it's a mixture. And the fourth level is on the right-hand side. The green one is called Netzach, which means endurance. Endurance means, I don't care what you do, I'm here. It's a flow. It's staying forever. I'm stuck. I'm here. You're not going to get rid of me. Netzach. Yeah, Netzach. And that is the fourth day of the week. God created the planets, the sun, the moon, the stars, and those are forever. They just sit here and they just sit around. We see the same moon that they saw thousands of years ago. It's the same. It's the image of consistency, endurance. The fifth level is the orange. That's on the left-hand side. The left-hand side is a withholding. That refers to humility. Hod, humility, and humility is withholding. A person doesn't want to blow themselves and show themselves and so on. They're humble. And on the fifth day of the week, God created the fish, which are always covered. That's humble. And He created the birds, which were created from the muck. It says from the dirt, the dirt mixed with water. So they also have a water base to them. And other elements with birds that also represent humility, but I don't want to get into that now. And then on the middle over here, this is the sixth level, the purple one. That is Yesod, which means, in Hebrew it means foundation, but it represents the ability to get things done. And for that you need both sides. To get things done you need a flow, but you also need a discipline. So again, it's a combination of both. And on the sixth day of creation, God created the rest of the world, including human beings who are supposed to at least get things done. And then on the seventh level is called Malchus, or kingship, royalty. It's a completion. When you've reached the zenith, when you've reached the apex, when you've reached the destination, you've come to the conclusion of your journey. Now it's an opportunity to look back and reflect of what we have created with this seven-step process. And what has happened in this seven-step process, and that of course is Shabbos, where you can elevate now the entire week. It becomes it's not just one day spiritual, but your 6 days which precedes it becomes spiritual. And in fact, it's also a preparation for the coming week, for the next week. That should also be imbued with spirituality based on what you've done on the Shabbos. It's a time to stop for a minute and reflect and enjoy what you have, what you've created, and begin the process of the next generation, of the next week, of the next time. Of course, on the seventh day, God rested because it's a day of sanctity, it's a day of holiness, day of Shabbos. There are also 7 negative traits that people can have, like jealousy, like anger, like ego. There are seven of those that fit into this, that are the opposites of the positive. There are no more than 7 positive and 7 negative. Any of the traits that we can identify, being honest or whatever it is, will all fit into these 7 traits. Now, 7 is the way the world works. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The weeks just continue going that way. And also with people, it's 7. So 7 is the normal, regular, routine chain from beginning to end. When you say number 8 in Judaism, and when you look at it through the prism of the Kabbalistic understanding of the numbers, number 8 represents something that is beyond or transcending of the regular, normal, routine chain that is created or comprised of 7 steps, 7 levels. In other words, one can go, or one can receive, one can work through the regular channels, day by day by day, step by step by step. There are times, though, where one can transcend that step and jump into the deep end immediately, without going through the steps. It's much more difficult. It's more difficult to do it, and it's certainly more difficult to internalize it, to get it. But there are those who can sometimes go beyond the routine, beyond the norm, beyond the regular prescribed steps, and become elevated to unlimited, without steps, levels. Those are the higher levels. The routine levels are routine. The world will function. There'll be a Sunday, and there'll be a Friday, and there'll be a Saturday, there'll be a Shabbos. That's routine. But sometimes you can get through above and beyond. Here's a story to illustrate this. This was in the times of the second Rebbe of Chabad, and it was Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Yom Kippur is one of the busiest days in the household of the Jewish calendar, because we gotta pray in the morning, and there are other things to do. Then you gotta get ready for Yom Kippur. Get ready for Yom Kippur is a physical and a spiritual mandate, not just, you eat because you have to eat, because or you're going to be hungry. The Torah says that when one fasts on Yom Kippur, one begins on the 9th day in the evening and continues to the 10th day of the month, continues to the 10th day of the month, which is Yom Kippur. So the Talmud says, why would you tell us about the 9th day? The 9th day is the day preceding it. So the Talmud says, from here you see that the 9th day has equal strength as the 10th day. But that's accomplished through eating. The eating on the 9th day is such a mitzvah that is equivalent to the fasting on the 10th day. That's a mitzvah we all love.
Yeah.
Nobody has a problem performing that mitzvah of eating on Erev. So it's we actually eat 2 meals with challah dipped in honey and kreplach and all the good business that we do on Erev Yom Kippur. It's a big deal on Erev Yom Kippur. Now, at break fast, it doesn't have to be a mitzvah there. It is obvious, natural, and everything else. But for the Erev Yom Kippur, not necessarily. At work, you might be busy, whatever. So you got to find time. Plus, you got to go to the mikveh on Erev Yom Kippur. You're supposed to purify oneself. It's a day of purity. And there's kapparas where we take a live chicken and we pass it through over our heads, and then the sheikh comes along and says good night. Which again, it's supposed to be a time of reflection, of repentance. It's a busy day, and plus other things, giving tzedakah. Now, about 200 years ago, there lived a chassid who woke up in the morning on Erev Yom Kippur, early in the morning, on his way to kapparas to find the chicken. And he passes by a person who's crying his eyes out. What's going on? His family has been taken as a hostage because he hasn't paid the bill. And those days, the landowners had at their will to do what they wanted. And he said, well then, I got to go to raise some funds for this poor family. And they lived in a shtetl that wasn't that wealthy. And he knocked on the doors, He spent 3 or 4 hours. Erev Yom Kippur, everybody is willing to give tzedakah. But when he got to the end, the last house that he knocked on, and this is already by about noontime, he realized that he only has a measly amount. Certainly no 300 rubles that he needed to get these people out. And he was completely distressed. And he asked some people, where can I go? And they said, there's some Jewish people who are not so interested in Erev Yom Kippur or Yom Kippur. And they're drinking in the bar down the road on Erev Yom Kippur. Go see if what you can do. He says, I'm desperate. I'll do anything I can. So he walks into the bar. And first of all, could you imagine a Hasidic rabbi walking into one of these wild places? And everybody stops. Incidentally, I was in a place which I don't even remember, somewhere in nowhere in Idaho, in the middle of nowhere, and I was stopping overnight. I had already made the arrangements, and I'm looking for the entrance to this motel, and I cannot find it. And I call up the number they say, just go through the bar. That's where the keys are. So in I walked into that bar, and within 3 seconds there was total and immediate silence. There was the incredibly thick smell of grease and cigarettes and cigars. It was just filled with, and it had these doors that open, like these western doors. Open up, here I come. And I had to walk through the bar to the front desk, I guess, office. bars at front desks to offices. I don't know how it works. I've never, believe me, that's not a place that I usually hang out. We have enough to drink in this house. Anyway, and I was like, whoa, like, what fell in here? Like, this is in the corner of Iowa where it connects to Utah, right in one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. But that bar wasn't that beautiful. Anyway, so this chassid walks into the bar, it's all quiet, and he finds some people. He says, listen, I need money. And they say, how much do you need? He says, I need 300 rubles to get this family out of jail. This Erev Yom Kippur, please. And they figured out, oh, you know what? We have a good idea here. And they said, if you drink a glass of vodka, we give you 100 rubles. He says, 100 rubles? Bring it on. They found the biggest mug they had. Filled it up with vodka. The guy makes a blessing. And he chugs the entire thing down. And they give him, bravo! They give him the 100 ruble. And he's still standing there. They said, what do you want now? He says, I need two more. They said, okay, no problem, 2 more. And so they filled up the 3 glasses. They gave him the 300 rubles. And his head was already not with him. But he had this, it was in his gut. So he just found his way to the place where he needed to find, plunked down the money, and then he himself plunked down straight on the floor, and out he went. And other Hasidim were walking up and down. Erev Yom Kippur, busy day. The guys were reeking of alcohol, and puke all over them. I mean, they were drunk. This man, this chassid, Erev Yom Kippur. The guy must have lost his mind. How sad, how this. Later that night, everybody was on their way to shul for Kol Nidre. He was out. He hadn't prayed that day. He hadn't done the chicken. He hadn't eaten. All he did was drank a lot of vodka, and he was completely in a drunken stupor. And it was a very sad sight. Somebody put him to the side, covered him over with something, and just left him there. And the shul went on. Kol Nidre, all the songs that we sing on the night of Yom Kippur, it's a very beautiful and inspiring service. And after the service, some have the custom to say in Chabad is this custom, to say the entire book of Psalms on that night. And they were in the middle of the Psalms, and all of a sudden a loud noise was heard. This chassid walking into the shul. He knew he had to get to shul just quite a few hours later. And he walked straight onto the bima. And he bangs on it, he was still, he bangs on the table, he says, guys, it's time for the Atar Reisa. It's time for the Hakafas, the things that we do on Simchas Torah 2 weeks later. And some people go, he's drunk in here now. And some guys stood up to help him out of the shul. And the Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Chabad, was there. He turned around and he said, stop, don't touch him. Where he is today, he's past Rosh Hashanah, he's past Yom Kippur, he's past Sukkot, he's past Shmini Atzeres. He is indeed at Simchas Torah already. Leave him. That's the most inspiring thing we have over here. The Rebbe knew already exactly. In other words, Yom Kippur was over for him. He didn't have to pray on the day before Yom Kippur. Whatever had to be done, he sacrificed himself to save another family. That is more, whatever Judaism is about, that epitomizes it more than anything else. That means taking the steps without going through the steps. That's number 8. Number 7 is going through the steps. You have a Rosh Hashanah, you have a month of Elul, you blow a shofar, then you have the penitence days, and then you have this, and you have that, and then you get to Simchas Torah, then you can dance. Now it's time to take out the Torah and let's get going, it's party. And those are the steps that we take through the high holidays. That's the final stage of the high holidays. Sometimes you can get to the high without the holidays. That's what he did. And that's what the Rebbe was saying, that leave him. He is there already. We're not, but he is, because he did more than what you can do. Anybody can do in the high holidays. He already did it one after them. That's number 8. Number 7 is the routine. Number 7 is the steps. Number 7 is the way God wanted the flow to work, and that's the way it works. But sometimes one can supersede all these steps and get straight into the source. That's number 8, above transcending the chain. By the way, a bris is on the 8th day of the child, and that's why it's a young child with beyond logic. If it would be logical, okay, then I get it. That's everything in Judaism is logical. But when it's beyond logic, then Judaism is beyond logic. That's the concept of having a bris on the 8th day, because number 8 represents that which supersedes the routine, the regular, the logical, and so on. That's what he's saying. Now let's read footnote number 12. See response of Rashba, volume 1, chapter 9, the Chafhe B'Kislev. These are references to where it talks about Hishtalshalut, and now they're going to explain it in number 12. Hishtalshalut, or Seder Hishtalshalut, is the Kabbalistic term that refers to the entire order of existence, or chain of being, which consists of myriad spiritual realms or worlds and chambers that gradually progress or devolve, as we discussed in the previous book. We were talking about devolvement into our lowly physical world. The word Hishtalshalut is derived from the word Shalshelet, which literally means chain, since in the order of existence, each realm or world is connected to the realm directly above and below it, much like a chain whose links are interconnected. See Torah Or, and so on. What the Kabbalists conceive of as being beyond Hishtalshalut is that which lies beyond the entire pale of existence, that which transcends the reality of creation. So the creation happens, as discussed at length in the previous treatise that we studied, that happens with a process. There's a beginning and there's an end. Over here, though, it's beyond the process. In numerological terms, the number 7 signifies Hishtalshalut, as it embodies the natural order of existence. There are 7 days in a week, 7 metaphysical heavens, etc. 7 times the bride went around the groom, which felt like 700 times, as I warned you. 8, conversely, embodies that which is beyond 7, i.e., beyond the natural order. That's what the response of the Rashba previously says. Hanukkah and Sukkot, both 8-day holidays, thus embody that beyond Hishtalshalut dimension, as will be explained further in the discourse. Okay? So, that would be a nice connection between the two holidays. You got the 8, and the 8 represents that which transcends. Whoa! It's a step straight up into the higher realms. It's wonderful. However, back now to the second paragraph on page 24 on the text. However,
Did you say 24?
yeah, back to page 24. No, you don't have to turn any sheet.
It's the same here.
Oh.
It's just on the other side of the page. However, this itself requires clarification, since what connection do Sukkot and Hanukkah have to the level of beyond Hishtalshalut, which causes them to be 8 days? Okay, I hear. They're both 8 days because they both represent beyond the limitation of the. But you know what? Passover should also be that way. Why is Hanukkah and Sukkot specifically chosen to be representative of the 8, which is a level which is beyond the regular steps of the routine, which transcends the normal? Why are those 2 festivals indeed 8? And why are the other ones not? What is the connection between them? So you're saying 8, I get it. But why are they 8? What's the reason? Why would those 2 have 8? Okay? Another question. And here comes another question. The sages, I'm reading inside here, it's not my question, it's the question that's in the text. The sages instituted the Hanukkah lamps because of the miracle that occurred with the lamps of the Beit HaMikdash. Beit HaMikdash means the holy temple. So the menorah that we light, we call it a menorah because that's the term that the Torah uses for the candelabrum that was used in the temple. Now, let's look at footnote number 13, which is on the right-hand side, on the bottom. See Shabbat, that's the Talmud of Shabbos. When the Greeks entered the sanctuary, this is a direct quote from the Talmud. When the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary. When the royal house of Hasmoneah, those were the Hashmonaim, that family that decided to take on the Greeks and bring the Hanukkah miracle about. So when this royal family overcame the Greeks and was victorious, they searched and could find only one jug of oil with the seal of the high priest still intact. This jug contained only enough oil to kindle the menorah for 1 day, yet a miracle occurred and the menorah was kindled from this oil for 8 days. The next year, the sages established these days as days of festival to celebrate with song and praise. That's straight out of the Talmud of the miracle of Hanukkah. What happened in Hanukkah doesn't talk about the defeat of the Greeks that much. It just continues to talk about the miracle of the oil, and it lasted for 8 days. Okay? So the sages, back to the text now on page 24. The sages instituted the Hanukkah lamps because of the miracle that occurred with the lamps of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple. Why then does Hanukkah have 8 lamps and days, when in the Beit HaMikdash there were 7 lamps? You want a menorah? The menorah in the temple had 7 lamps. It had 3 branches this way and 1 in the middle, as the menorah in our shul, which Mel beautifully created. It's 3 and 3 and then 1 in the middle. On Hanukkah we have 8. 4 and 4. 1 more. If we're supposed to be commemorating the miracle that happened in the temple, why have a menorah with 8 lamps?
Because it burned for 8 days.
Well, that's a very good point. That's a good answer. Because it burned for 8 days. So how else are you going to light 8 days if you don't have an 8 lamp menorah? Well then, let's look here. Number 15. Number 15 is a footnote that was put by the Rebbe here. It's a translation of the footnote that was placed by the Rebbe. As my father-in-law, the Rebbe, see below footnote 52, questions in his book over here. Now, let's continue. It would seem that the Hanukkah menorah has 8 lamps and not 7 like the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash in the temple, because it is intended to commemorate the miracle that occurred with the oil, which lasted for 8 days. Well, as Marita said, how else are you going to light the menorah for 8 days if you only have 7 lamps? You got to have 8. We therefore celebrate this 8-day holiday by lighting 8 lamps. However, this solution is problematic. Not so simple. It's problematic. As in fact, the oil burnt miraculously for only 7 days. How much oil was in that jug? Enough to last for
1 day.
1 day. So the miracle wasn't really 8 days, it was for 7 days. It lasted for 7 further days. Because it had enough for 1 day.
Because it takes 7 days to make new oil.
Correct. But it had to last for 7 new days.
So they could get more oil to light it further.
They needed to wait this amount of time to make new oil, correct?
Right, but have you ever heard that it took 8 or 7 days to the road trip to go there and back?
That was also included, a day each way. Okay, so since the oil was naturally able to burn for 1 day, why then is Hanukkah celebrated with 8 days and lamps? Yet from the wording of the Talmud, the menorah was kindled from this oil for 8 days. It appears that there was indeed a miracle all 8 days. Perhaps this can be explained as follows. Every evening, the Hasmoneans, those are the people again who were in the temple, who defeated the Greeks, would use just 1/8 of the oil, and miraculously, this small amount would fill the lamps entirely. Thus, a miracle occurred on each of the 8 days of Hanukkah. But this still begs the question: Why was the miracle of the oil specifically for 8 days and not 1 day less and not 1 day more? So the number 8 seems to be importance in and of itself. Not just the 8 days, commemorate 8 days, but it seems to be pushing number 8 for Hanukkah. And the question is, why would Hanukkah be associated with that specific above the norm, transcending the norm? What's so special about Hanukkah? And what's so special about Sukkot that compares the two together? There are 2 further questions that the Rebbe asks on the connection between the Sukkot and the Hanukkah, which we will get to next week before we begin the explanation of this beautiful idea of Hanukkah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.
I'd like more here to